As you well know, Australians are worried about the cost of living at the moment, and some are far more than worried. Some are really struggling to meet their obligations. The Reserve Bank has sought to encourage anxious Australians with talk of buffers that will help us weather this storm. Household savings are one of those buffers. A lot of Australians have been putting money away in savings or in additional mortgage payments. And there is no doubt that those who have done this will have a greater chance of holding on to their assets as interest rates rise. Now, I'm not an economist by any means. Those are kind of the words I've just used. That's all the economics jargon that you're ever going to hear from me. But while I feel uncomfortable focusing on wealthy Australians and how much savings wealthy Australians have, rather than the many Australians who are only one pay packet away from eviction, I can see the sense in people putting money away as a buffer if they possibly can. And that's what makes us feel uncomfortable with today's parable, isn't it? A wealthy man had some excellent years and so built bigger and bigger barns to contain his largesse, so he could feel secure and live at ease. Isn't that the wise thing to do? No, according to this parable. God calls that man a fool. Now, how do we respond to this? How have you responded to it in the past? It's a well-known parable. You, I'm sure, have your thoughts about it. One response is to say, well, of course, that's what Luke would say. He had just had it in for wealthy people. And Luke's gospel does begin with Mary singing about the God who fills the hungry with good things and sends the rich away empty. Luke alone includes the parable about the selfish man and the poor homeless Lazarus, whose fortunes are dramatically reversed after death. In the second part of Luke's story, in the book of Acts, he describes the first Christians selling their property and sharing the money with people in the community who had nothing. Luke's message is clear. Following Jesus will transform every aspect of your life, including your bank account. So yeah, it is what Luke would say. Another response is to look more closely at what Jesus is criticizing in this man. Is it just that he's rich, or is there something else going on? So let's have a look at it. The land of a rich man produced abundantly, and he thought to himself, what should I do? For I have no place to store my crops. Then he said, I will do this. I will pull down my barns and build bigger barns. And there I will store all my grain and my goods. I will say to my soul, soul, you have ample goods laid up for many years. Relax, eat, drink, and be merry. On the surface, it seems to be a sensible plan. So what are we missing? Well, a better question might be, what was the rich man missing? What should he have done that he didn't do? Now, keeping in mind, and this is always a good thing to keep in mind, that Jesus' hearers had a much better knowledge of the Hebrew scriptures than we do. They knew them inside out. So what might they have seen in this story that we could miss? Well, glad you asked, because as it turns out, this story comes pretty much straight from Deuteronomy 8. And that is a really important section of their law. I'll read verses 12 to 19 to you. When you have eaten your fill and have built fine houses and live in them, and when your herds and flocks have multiplied and your silver and gold is multiplied, and all that you have is multiplied, then do not exalt yourself, forgetting the Lord your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of slavery. Do not say to yourself, my power and my might and my own hand have gotten me this wealth. But remember the Lord your God, for it is God who gives you power to get wealth. If you forget the Lord your God, I solemnly warn you today that you shall surely perish. The rich man in the parable is like an Israelite who had entered into the good life provided by God, but had then forgotten the God who was the source of all he had. Now, seeing the connection to Deuteronomy also reminds us of the corporate dimension of this life of wisdom that Jesus is calling people to. Deuteronomy is addressing the nation as a whole, as a people group. So perhaps we should also ask if Australia is the rich man in the story, not just each of us potentially individually. And there it does get tricky because we are living in a secular society that has made no vow or commitment to God that we could remind the people around us about keeping. But still, within our society, we can live as people of God. We can use our voices to thank God for the good things that God has given, and we can use our voices to call on God to help in need, and we can use our voices to uphold truth wherever we find it. And we can do that through times of prosperity and times of hardship. Now, did you notice the reference to slavery in Egypt in that Deuteronomy reading? This is a central theme all through the law and the prophets. Remember where you came from. You were a slave race, so respect slaves. You were poor, so provide for those who are poor now. You were strangers in a strange land, so make space and provision for the foreigners in your land. As we take ancient Israel as our spiritual ancestors, we stand in that tradition of remembering that we were once poor foreign slaves. And so we also are called to identify with those people and treat them with dignity and respect. We can also learn lessons from our own particular history. To the Jewish people, it's remember you were slaves in Egypt. To us in Australia, maybe it is remember that our ancestors took this land through violent conquest. Our wealth has come at an incalculable cost. If we turn across to Leviticus 19, we read, You shall not strip your vineyard bare, or gather the fallen grapes of your vineyard. You shall leave them for the poor and the alien. I am the Lord your God. Remembering the Lord your God means that you won't put efficiency before generosity. The Hebrew scriptures express the vision of the abundant life using the word shalom. Shalom is the good life, the life of peace in the land flowing with milk and honey. And that life of shalom includes material sufficiency, growing crops and harvesting them, providing for yourself and your family from your own plot of land. But shalom is much more than that. It is experienced in 3 dimensions: God, community, and land. Shalom includes peace with God, from whom we receive everything as a gift. Now, I'm wearing my bangle today. I think it's pretty. But the reason I really value it is that it was a gift from one of my sisters. And what gives it even more value is that she bought 4 identical bangles so that all of us sisters can have the same bangle. And we wear them when we get together. They have become symbols of our sisterhood. Relationship adds deep value to our possessions when those possessions come to us as a gift from someone we love. And so for God's people, when they were settled in the land and experienced the shalom of sufficiency and permanency, they were also meant to experience that even deeper shalom of knowing that they had received all those good things as a gift from the God who loves them. That's the God dimension of shalom. Another dimension is that those in the community who are less well off, the poor, the foreigner, must be included in our shalom. They were not to be exploited, they were to be paid fairly for their work, and they were to be allowed to harvest a portion of every crop. So shalom has a God dimension and a community dimension, and it also has a land dimension. The land provided the good things they needed to live, and so they were to care for that land by rotating crops and leaving it fallow every few years. So the good life pictured in the Hebrew scriptures was a life of relationship, of grateful receiving and generous giving with God, the community, and the land. That is the breathing in and the breathing out of the good life. Receiving with gratitude from God, from the community, and from the land. And giving with generosity to God, to the community, to the land. And that is why the man in the parable is called a fool. The true life of shalom has eluded him. He finds no joy in receiving prosperity as a gift from God. He is not extending shalom to his community by sharing the good things that he has received. And we have to read a little into this, but possibly he is exploiting his land rather than nurturing it. He lives without shalom, and so he dies alone. Ultimately, he is to be pitied more than criticized. This parable challenged Jesus' hearers and challenges us to consider, are we really experiencing shalom? Are we living, breathing human beings, receiving with gratitude, giving with generosity, or are we fools? It's easy to be a rich fool. It's also easy to be a poor fool. Most of the people Jesus spoke with were grindingly poor. And if you've ever been poor, you've probably thought, if only I just knew that I would have enough to live on, then I would have nothing to worry about. I would be at peace. Then I would experience shalom. But that's a lie. I have been poor, so I'm not going to glorify poverty, but wealth does not give shalom, and poverty does not take it away. We can receive with gratitude, even when we receive only just enough to keep us alive. And we can give with generosity, even when we have only a kind word to our name. That is shalom. That is the good life, whether we are rich or poor. And in a community of shalom, and of course shalom is always in community, those who are poor will always be provided for. And not just the financially poor, but also those who lack the spiritual, intellectual, physical, and emotional resources that others have in abundance. We are called to be a shalom community in Ashgrove, receiving with gratitude and sharing with generosity. We do that every Sunday. We recall God's grace, we sing God's praises, we offer ourselves to God as living sacrifices. We give peace and receive peace from each other. And we give money for the work of ministry. And we receive the bread and wine that sustains us. These are not economic transactions. Shalom is about relationship. It is the breathing in and breathing out of our life together. And we don't stop breathing when we go out through the church doors. Shalom is our joy and our wisdom all week. And shalom is our gift to a world that is struggling to breathe. And so, throughout this week, may the shalom of the Lord be with you. Amen.